coming in. Yes, Return of the Jedi has always been one of my favorite movies. It came out when I was 20 years old. One of my friends sitting next to me was afraid that Luke might turn to the dark side one day. I thought that was impossible at the time. The ending of Return of the Jedi was meant to give people hope. Not many people know this, though, but this movie was built around an ending that was turned down before. Because it changed Luke into a character that Star Wars wouldn't let him become. An ending where darkness isn't conquered but passed on, and the myth falls apart at the very end. The movie didn't go there to keep the story going, and it hid a lot of things on the way back to the light. The 12 dark secrets below show what Return of the Jedi has been avoiding for decades. 12. Luke Skywalker was going to be killed by the rebels. When I saw Return of the Jedi for the first time, I remember how it made me feel. Luke was dressed in black and was more quiet and calm. The theater was dead silent when he left Leia and Han to go to Death Star 2 by himself. Everyone knew this was the most dangerous part of the movie, but no one said it out loud. "What if Luke doesn't come back?" asked a friend in a whisper. I thought the Rebel Alliance must have had a plan and a relief team ready back then. Or at least a plan B in case something went wrong. Even though it wasn't shown in the movie, I was sure it existed. But if you watch it again when you're more calm, a disturbing truth comes out. The fighters didn't know how to save Luke. There were no talks about what to do in an emergency, no backup plans, and not even a plan B in case Luke was killed, abused, or brainwashed. Luke gave up on his own, and the rebels were able to accept that choice with icy calm. I am Mothma Akbar. No one spoke out against or asked about the whole command system. What if Luke fails? The Endor operation would go on regardless because the answer was already clear in their figures. That can only mean one thing. They were ready to give up Luke Skywalker as a piece. Most of the time, the Rebel Alliance is shown as the good guys. But right now, they're not that different from the Empire. As long as the odds of the war tip in their favor, both sides are ready to risk the life of a young person. Luke is no longer a person who has fears, doubts, and the chance of failing. He is useful for strategy and a sign for Vader and Palpatine. It costs blood to have hope that things will work out. In that version of the story, Luke Skywalker is ready to die for his beliefs. 11. Vader was not saved. He just died at the right time. When I was younger, I cried when Vader took off his mask. His eyes were tired, and his voice was weak. A dad who gets to see his kid for the very first time. At that moment, it's strong and easy to think that everything is okay. I'm getting older, though, and death seems too easy. Anakin Skywalker never really faces what he did. No apology to the millions of victims, and no responsibility other than letting people die. He saves Luke from doing something very personal, and then he leaves the story right away. That's what the movie calls salvation. But the moral consequences would have been terrible if Vader had lived. Is it possible to forgive a war criminal just because he loves his child? Vader's death is more than just sad. It's a way out of the story. Every tough question is shut down before the crowd has a chance to ask it. There is never a court case. There is no justice done. Just one sad moment, and the screen goes black. Anakin's past is totally erased when he shows up as a Force ghost with Obi-Wan and Yoda. It doesn't sound like anyone is being tortured or that worlds are being burned to the ground. In soft blue light, history is written over again. That is not being forgiven. That's what it means to erase group memory. Return of the Jedi puts feelings ahead of morals because being moral would ruin the happy ending. Vader dies at just the right time, which keeps the story alive even though the truth is buried with him. Luke kills Vader and turns into a Sith. I was in the theater at the time and saw Luke lash out at Vader with anger in his eyes. I remember quickly thinking about a possibility that the movie didn't go after. I didn't want it to happen, but it looked like everything on the screen was moving that way. Vader's labored breathing, the red light of the throne room, and Luke's hits that were getting faster, less controlled, and less like the calm of a Jedi. At that point, the ending we got wasn't the only thing that could have happened. In fact, there was a version that almost became Return of the Jedi. Luke doesn't stop with that thought. No, he doesn't kill Vader out of duty. He does it out of anger, loss, and fear of being weak. Right after that, Luke doesn't turn away from Palpatine. Instead, he accepts the power of the dark side, puts on Vader's helmet, and walks into the empty spot next to the throne. That ending would have made the story end in a loop if it had stayed. Perfect in every way. He falls because he loves someone and wants to save them. Luke falls because he can't handle giving up something. It's not just that the Jedi Order fails, it's completely erased, not as a broken organization that needs fixing, but as a dream that has come to an end. Evil doesn't go away, it just changes forms, words, and generations. That's exactly why this ending was turned down. It takes away from the whole message of hope that Star Wars is trying to send. Myths don't want to accept this, but the truth is that people don't always get through the dark times and fate doesn't always provide a way out. It's an ending that's too honest and cruel to fit in a story that's supposed to be a spiritual haven for generations. 9. Yoda knew that the Jedi Order had already failed. Have you ever thought of Yoda's death as a change of power? The master leaves. The pupil moves forward. A lovely circle that is finished. But that feeling changes when you pay close attention to every word Yoda says. Even though Yoda's job is done, he doesn't die. He ends his life because he has nothing else to do. Is there another Jedi? Luke asks Yoda. Yoda tells Luke the truth, there is no plan B. In the sense of myth, Luke is not the chosen one. Luke is the last person left. It's not that he's perfect, but because every other choice has died or failed. A long time ago, the Jedi Order fell apart. It didn't go away in one night. It destroyed itself because of its pride in its faith and its belief that it was always right. Even Yoda knows this. Obi-Wan knows this. But they have no other choice. Except to place all their hope in a young man who is not ready. So when Luke wins, it is not a success for the Jedi, it is survival born of desperation. The Jedi do not win because the light is more righteous than the dark. They win because there is no one else left to try. The film presents that moment as hope, but looked at directly, it is a final risk. And Yoda does not leave in peace but in bitter acceptance that the order he once protected has failed, rescued, only by telling the story in a way that is gentler than reality. 8. Palpatine is not mad. He is right about human nature. Many people remember Palpatine as a fairy tale monster who is pure evil and laughs grotesquely while lightning shoots out of his dead hands. But the more I watch the movie, the more I understand that what scares me most about Palpatine is not his power, but how calmly he watches people. It's not like Palpatine tries to force Luke to agree with him. He doesn't start torturing or threatening right away. Instead, he tells us an uncomfortable truth: people will choose violence when they feel like they are losing something. Not because they are bad, but because violence is the last thing that people do to get back in charge. Luke shows this right before he almost kills Vader. Palpatine does nothing but sit and watch, hoping that anger will do the job. Palpatine is right at that point. Luke really does get too close to the dark side, and it's not because he is tricked, it's because he is human. And people can feel hopeless too. Palpatine loses not because his theory is wrong, but because he gets one small thing wrong. Luke stops, but not because Palpatine is found out. He stops because he is scared of what he is ending up becoming. This win is based on a split second of self-awareness and not on a truth that can't be shaken. The scary thing is this. Palpatine would have been right if that moment had gone by a little faster and Luke hadn't seen Vader's mechanical hand. And the movie doesn't go after that fact. Because letting people know how well Palpatine understands people would make it too hard to tell the difference between evil and reality, making people feel unsafe. 7. In her own movie, Leia loses her power. Do you remember Leia from the first movies? Ready to fire a blaster and make choices in life or death situations, tough, sharp, and not in need of protection. Leia is more than a princess. In battle, she is a leader. Who plans things for the Rebel Alliance. That's why I once had a hazy feeling that something had changed while watching Return of the Jedi, even though I couldn't put my finger on it. Leia is still in this movie, but her power is purposely cut down. She turns into the lover Han is waiting for, the sister who needs to be protected, and finally a way to make the story more normal. Leia is no longer in charge of making big choices. Her planned role is pushed to the side, making room for feelings and real connections between people. This change isn't a mistake. Making the ending feel kinder is clearly meant to do that. An independent, strong woman who isn't afraid to question authority and right and wrong would make the story a lot more unpleasant. The movie instead uses Leia as an emotional anchor to keep the audience's attention on the Skywalker family instead of the war's political and moral effects. Because of that choice, a figure who used to be strong is now weaker to fit the myth. Leia doesn't really go away, but her voice is dropped to make the story end on a false note of peace. We now see that even though we won, the way the story is told took away some of our powers. Not because of the Empire, but because of how the story is told. 6. Though I laughed a lot when I was younger, the Ewoks are not from a children's story. They are from primitive warfare. Little furry creatures that speak a language no one can understand were running through the forest like they were from a fairy story. The Ewoks were what made Return of the Jedi feel lighter, more fun, and safer for kids at the time. But the older I get and the more slowly I watch the movie again, the more I understand that this happy feeling is hiding something very disturbing. The Ewoks don't beat the Empire by being pure. They have to use violence to win. Traps made of wood are set up to crush stormtroopers. Huge logs hit forms right on the spot. Rocks fall from the sky. The enemy is burned alive with fire. And finally, there is encirclement by sheer numbers, which is the oldest way that tribes have fought. Civilized war is not going on here. People in modern countries like to say they are no longer affected by this kind of violence, but the truth is that they have just hidden it. The Ewoks fight like our distant ancestors did when they were protecting their land. They kill invaders without rules or mercy. All of this is made funny in the movie by using silly sound effects, slow camera work, and cute responses. Because the question would come up right away if the movie stopped, even for a moment, to let people think. How did they get killed? And once that question is asked, Return of the Jedi stops being a story for kids and turns into a warning that every victory is based on very old forms of violence that are just told in a more palatable way. 5. The Battle of Endor is a massacre dressed up as a festival. I still remember how excited I was during the battle. The action moves quickly, and the music gets the Ewoks and rebels to work together. The Empire keeps losing ground. The audience can happily cheer during this scene, which is one of the most visually satisfying fights in Star Wars. And it's that ease that makes it so upsetting. A lot of stormtroopers die at Endor, but none of them are named. There are no scenes of soldiers crying, and there are no bodies that stay in the frame. There was no moment of silence to tell us that these are real people, not moving targets. They are turned into problems that the heroes have to solve in order to win in the end. This is an old trick used for marketing. If the enemy is unknown, killing them has no moral weight because they don't have a face, a story, or a family. When you're at home waiting, it's much easier to accept violence. The Battle of Endor is put on as a party game. It's not that there isn't much blood, it's that the crowd has forgotten about the blood. At that point, war is no longer a tragedy. After a while, the right side always wins and the wrong side just goes away from the screen. For Return of the Jedi's ending to feel full, this way of framing is necessary. If Endor was shown for what it really is, a massacre in the forest, the joy of victory would change right away. The emptiness is hidden by the music. The music in Return of the Jedi might be the thing that makes it easier to watch. The music comes on at just the right times, makes us feel good right where it's needed, and takes us from stress to ease without making us think. But try to picture this movie without John Williams' music. Vader's death would not be sad anymore. There would be a cold silence between two tired people. There would be no heroic sound in victory, there would only be a void when everything is over. But Luke wouldn't stand in a bath of mythical light. He would stand alone among the dead bodies, ashes, and unsolved questions. Music does more than just make you feel more strongly. It tells you how to feel. It tells you when to cry, when to calm down, and when to believe that things will get better. It makes the movie much darker without it. In that movie, winning doesn't erase loss and light isn't strong enough to break through darkness. That's why the music fits perfectly as a cover. The things that happen on screen don't change, but how we remember them do. And it's easy to think this is the right finish once memory has been led that way. Even when there is nothing but music underneath. The movie doesn't want us to stay with it long enough to really feel. 3. The fact that Anakin shows up as a Force ghost is a lie. Most people remember a part of Return of the Jedi, but very few ever stop to think about it. At this point, Luke looks off into the distance and sees three ghosts standing next to each other in soft light, like wise old men who have finished their job. The scene goes by quickly and softly, like the movie's closing nod, letting us know that everything is okay. But because it is so pretty, it has been bothering me more and more over time. There are no signs of what Anakin Skywalker has done on him as he stands there. There is no blood, no pain, and no sense of devastated worlds or lives crushed in the dark. It's as if everything that used to make him Darth Vader never existed. The only thing that's left is a clean picture that makes people nod and say, he's forgiven. That's not forgiveness, though. To forgive, you have to face your guilt. In order to forgive, memory must stay intact so that pain is not hidden. That's not what this scary scene does. It does something much more subtle instead. With a beautiful picture, it erases our common memory. History is changed in the nicest way possible when Anakin is on the same level as Obi-Wan and Yoda. There is no longer a criminal, there is only a lost soul. No victims, just stories. The movie doesn't have to lie. It only needs to pick an image strong enough to replace the parts of past that are hard to remember. And when people leave the theater with that picture in their minds, the truth is no longer clear, not because of words, but by how you feel. To avoid political duty, they turned the story into a family drama. It's easy to love Return of the Jedi because it has a very personal feel to it. Fathers and kids, brothers and sisters, and members of a broken family get back together. By focusing on family bonds, the story gives people a clear emotional anchor to hold on to. But that choice will have a much bigger effect. Politicians don't have to be responsible when all disagreements are seen as family problems. It's no longer about power or ideas when war turns into a human tragedy. The Empire is no longer a huge machine that kills people, it turns into a bad parent. The rebellion is no longer a complicated political organization. It is now a journey to bring a broken family back together. No one has to answer for the billions of people who died when everything is about family issues. No one has to deal with the long-term effects of a system falling apart. With a hug, a meaningful death, and a symbolic reuniting, everything is over. This is an extremely successful way to tell a story, but it is also very risky. Because responsibility is broken down into individual parts and then sealed off with emotion, people can leave without thinking about group responsibility. In Return of the Jedi, family is used as a safe way to talk about problems that would make the story too heavy to stay a myth if they were dealt with directly. First, this is not the end of bad things. It's just evil taking on new forms. When the Death Star blew up and the Emperor disappeared, I and many other people thought that was the end of the world. Evil had been wiped out. Light had won. With fireworks and music, it was hard not to believe that. That's not how power works, though. The Empire is not something that can die at any time. It's a whole machine. Everyday life is full of power structures, factories, propaganda systems, supply lines, and officers. Getting rid of the Emperor and the Death Star doesn't get rid of those things. It only leaves a power void, and places without power are always good for new violence. Because there wouldn't be any fireworks if the movie told the truth, it doesn't show what happens later. There would only be purges during a civil war, payback, and long-lasting political chaos. People who used to work for the Empire would be changing outfits. Some people would use freedom to take power for themselves. The most beautiful part of Return of the Jedi is when it ends. Because that time is real. But because that's the only place where the story still works. Evil doesn't go away. It's just been told again in a way that makes us feel safe. That could be the deadliest secret in this movie. When Return of the Jedi ends, we still remember how we felt back then, happy, relieved, and sure that everything had finally worked out. Booming music, fireworks in the sky, and happy faces, you know. We all want to believe in the ending, but the longer I live outside of movies and the more times I watch it, the more I know it's not a lie. It doesn't tell the whole story because it wants to. It hides obligations that aren't named, covers up guilt with beautiful pictures, and avoids moral questions so the myth can live on. How about you? Which part of Return of the Jedi makes you feel nervous for the first time when you watch it again today? Write something below. What movie would you like us to watch next? Remember to like, share, and subscribe, because the next movie might start with a memory of your own.